live in a world where the idea of love is fed by a happily ever after. Our perception of what should and should not be is completely skewed by what we have learned in media. The typical pattern of intense passion and emotions, a conflict that makes us fight for that God-forsaken love, and then the resolution of being together forever. We see any romantic or sexual interests outside of that relationship as immoral, and that we must constrain ourselves for this one love for the rest of our lives. But is there such a thing as your one and only love? Is it not possible to love more than one soul? This question has resulted in cheating, divorce, resentment, conflicts, and a lot of lying. Is monogamy the only way to be in a loving relationship? More and more people are finding healthy relationships inside consensual, non-monogamous relationships. In actuality, the cultures that only accept monogamous relationships are in the minority worldwide. According to a paper in the Journal of Evolutionary Biology, 83% of societies allow polygamy. At Psych2Go, we're bringing you the 8 signs polyamory may be right for you. The first sign is that you have always felt limited and confined in conventional relationships. It's not the person you're with that's making you feel confined, it's the situation. Have you ever felt like you're no longer acting as an individual, but always thinking about being faithful to your partner? And you can't help but think, does this come from a place of love, freedom, and security? Or does it come from a place of ownership, jealousy, and fear? Sign number 2 is that you learn so much about yourself through others. Relationships are fun, yes, but they are also incredible opportunities to learn and explore different aspects of yourself. Each person is a universe, and both negative and positive experiences that we venture in with them are a journey to learning and growing individually as a person. If you are limited to only one relationship, there may be aspects of yourself you are neglecting. Sign number 3 is that you are the kind of person who feels energized by other people. Does diving into experiences with people outside of your primary relationship nurture, energize, and refresh you? Do you feel energized and refreshed after you have an innocent yet perhaps a little flirtatious coffee with someone from the opposite sex whilst in a relationship? This does not have to imply any physical engagement. An innocent lunch date is enough. In a polyamorous relationship, you are free to flirt, have fun, and share your experiences with other people in any way you desire. Sign 4 is that you like to constantly challenge yourself in order to grow. The most common reason for people rejecting an open relationship is jealousy. They would rather not deal with the intensity of jealous feelings they would get with the very imagination of their partner engaging with someone else. But what if polyamory will teach you to be less jealous and to love with complete freedom? Would this not be like taking an entire weight off of your shoulders? This experience, while still being a very difficult one, will teach you to love someone. Fear, jealousy, and possession are not things that come from a place of love. Consider it a love boot camp. Sign number 5 is that communication and honesty are very important things for you. You can't stand lying about anything, and let's be honest, most people feel safer not admitting to their partners that they may be interested in or attracted to someone else. They may also not feel safe about telling their partner about certain friendships for fear of jealousy. You are the kind of person who would rather be open about these difficult topics and feel safe in approaching them with your partner. You think it's best and healthier to tackle the situation and finding a compromise that makes you both happy. If there is something forbidden to us, we will only want it more. If we feel free to be with somebody else, then the initial excitement of that forbidden fruit is gone. Sign number 6 is that you don't like living life by society's rules and tend to question everything. You are not one to follow social constructs of what should and should not be. You often find yourself questioning these impositions made on us. Polyamory is instantly rejected by society and almost seen as a threat to normal relationships and normal family life. However, you prefer to live an experience for yourself before deciding your opinion on something, as opposed to following everybody else like a sheep. Sign number 7 is that you trust your love and connection with this person more than anything. You don't think that seeing someone else could possibly take away from your love and devotion to your partner. If anything, it might even strengthen your appreciation for them. If the connection you have is authentic, then it is really hard for that to just go away with the introduction of someone new. Sometimes we just enjoy someone new in our lives, but that does not mean we want them to ever replace our partner. And finally, sign number 8 is that you are aware that we can love more than one person and feel attracted to more than one person. If we learn to accept that one person cannot fulfill every desire that we have, then we will immediately resent our partner less and appreciate them more. If we decide to allow ourselves and our partners to fulfill things we can't through someone else, we are making them happy, and that, my friend, is love. Thank you for watching this video, and hopefully these signs helped you see if you'd potentially be open for a polyamorous relationship, or if you're more happy in a monogamous one.
For better or worse, I think I can probably safely say you're one of the most high-profile academic couples who are willing to talk about and explore the issues around polyamory. Yeah. What do you make of the fact that you're now kind of the poster academics for this subject?
But there aren't nearly enough other people.
Yeah, one thing you realize if you get into debates about polyamory versus monogamy, you know, it was said by a lot of folks in the alt-right, politics is downstream of culture. But culture also apparently is downstream of the mating system. So if you really want to get people riled up, you challenge the mating system that actually dominates, you know, relations between the sexes, but also family structure, and has knock-on effects on everything from kind of the design of housing and urban spaces to the design of careers, and the extent to which people can kind of use freedom of association to form little families or polycules or communes or whatever. And as soon as you kind of shake the tree of monogamy and challenge that, people panic and they think, like, what else might have to change if this is ever questioned?
We actually don't really pay that much attention to other polyamorous people because we think that a lot of what other polyamorous people endorse is actively harmful. So not to put too fine a point on it. But yeah, I always like to say that we don't endorse it. We just talk about how it can work for some people and about how it is potentially a better way to have a fuller life for people who can manage jealousy and who, you know, I think I actually don't understand how people do polyamory without an evolutionary perspective, for example. And that is something that we're planning on exploring more and writing and in videos, yeah.
Yeah, like we don't really hang out in the polyamory Facebook groups or go to poly meetups or go to the conferences or whatever. I've read all the poly books. I'm very familiar with scientific research on it. I've taught a class on polyamory and open relationships. But I think a lot of the aspects of at least American polyamory culture are kind of dominated by the same far left, you know, ideologies and gender constructivist views that are absolutely handicapping to real relationships. So we kind of like to keep our distance from kind of polyculture, even though I think we have a huge respect for the impulse to try to have, you know, a new ethical approach to relationships that's open and honest and fulfilling and adventurous, and it's just kind of heartbreaking to see people try to do poly without understanding human nature.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people engage in polyamory because they have some kind of ideological commitment, right? They want to show the world that it's possible to escape your monogamous programming, or they have some kind of feminist agenda or even a communist agenda. They don't want another person to own them. They don't want to be in a contract with someone else. They see exclusive monogamous relationships as some kind of wing of capitalism, for example, and that somebody else owns your labor and owns you as property. And we really do what we do because we think it's fun and fulfilling. And I mean, for me, I'm a utilitarian really from an evolutionary and utilitarian perspective, that I'm having the best time I can have, and not because I'm trying to show people that I'm not owned or that I don't own him, right?
Still a quite small percentage of people actually do open relationships in poly. It's not likely to become the majority anytime soon. So it's almost like the people who thought that you chose to be gay or lesbian thinking we have to keep a lid on that whole homosexuality stuff because, oh my God, everybody would obviously turn gay if they could. Yeah. It's like, no, there's a certain percent of people for whom that works. And I think for us it works. For a certain percentage of other people, polyamory probably could work very well, at least for certain phases of their life. But it'll be interesting to have a debate like that, because I think, you know, the monogamists basically have the view everybody must be monogamous pretty much all the time. And the reasonable polyamorous are like, some people can be poly some of the time at certain life stages if they develop certain skills, but we wouldn't advocate it, I think, for, like, it's not ready for prime time, really.
Yeah.
I guess the question that comes up immediately is, what are the skills?
I think the number one skill that I have that helps me is skepticism towards my own feelings. So understanding that I am an evolved creature, I have certain feelings and thoughts and ruminations and cognitions, and just because I have a thought or I feel a negative emotion or I feel jealous, for example, doesn't necessarily mean that those feelings are communicating something true that I have to listen to or that I have to solve a problem to reduce, right? It could just be that those things are ways of managing the relationships that I'm in that are in some sense vestigial, and I can figure out a way to reduce those feelings. And for me, in terms of all my relationships and everything I think about in terms of evolutionary psychology, it goes hand to hand with meditation, actually. I have found meditation to be really helpful for, if you take a look at your native programming, if you can look at it, the feelings that come up and think about what they are from an evolutionary perspective, then you can actually dissipate those emotions, I think, with mindfulness. And I don't know if anybody else has ever talked about combining these two things, but that's how I do it.
Yeah. I think you're also unusually good at articulating what you actually want and then kind of committing to, if I say I want that and then I deliver it, kind of taking responsibility for saying that I should be content with that.
Yeah.
Rather than sort of going back on your word and saying, no, I like what I actually meant was this. So I think it requires a really high degree of kind of rationality, being articulate, having self-insight, having emotional maturity. Like, polyamory is probably a bad idea for kids in high school. And I think Diana talked about, there's a kind of, monogamy has a bunch of hacks and tools and norms that are really good, developed over centuries. Polyamory's only been around basically since about 1990 in its current form. And it doesn't have a bunch of those norms and hacks. And the problem is polyculture is so unjudgmental that they're kind of unwilling to say, this works, that doesn't work. Hey, everybody, let's not do that thing again. So I think it has to become more kind of serious and professionalized as a culture that says, like, sorry, the relationship anarchy thing just doesn't actually work because you can't create sustainable, predictable commitments with it. The hierarchical polyamory, maybe that works better, but here's some ways to tweak it, improve it, etc. So I think if the left owns polyamory as it does now, and if the left really strongly believes in the blank slate and bad communication and hypocrisy, then polyamory is going to fail as a movement.
I mean, certainly free love in the 1960s, people have tried to manifest their relationships in such a way that they are a representation of their philosophy. That's happened for a long time. But I do think that polyamory is trying to be a representation of the philosophy that humans are really malleable, that an emotion like jealousy, which obviously has an evolutionary function, and I would totally disagree with the idea, like Christopher Ryan says, that jealousy is in some sense unnatural and is the product of an agricultural society. I think jealousy, if you look at hunter-gatherers, as old as dirt, as old as non-human primates, jealousy is very, very important. And so to say, I think that humans can overcome any of their emotions, I think that we're socialized to have these feelings and to be possessive. Polyamory is a way of saying I can overcome all of those things because that is not us, but that is us. And so I think the way we think about it is really different in terms of working with our evolved psychology rather than saying there is no human nature.
So there's like a kind of communist, idealist, blank slate version of polyamory that's like nobody should own anybody. And we're more of a kind of libertarian polyamory that's like everybody should take responsibility for what they want and what they say and negotiate, consensual win-win relationships that are open and honest. And we don't like polyamory being used as sort of a way to virtue signal leftist ideals. We think it's much like you're dealing with real people to whom you have real responsibilities.
Do you think it's relevant that you're evolutionary psychologists that you think this way?
Yeah, I mean, two things that kind of turned me polyamorous were, number one, being in evolutionary psychology and seeing the range of mating systems that are out there and thinking the range of what people actually do in modern society is perhaps overly limited, right? And then meeting her and seeing, oh, she actually runs her life in a successful and rational way doing this polyamory thing that I knew very little about. So as I learned about it, I thought, this is great. There's a lot here, very interesting, this experimental subculture, very well-intentioned often, but there's a lot of stuff they're doing in crazy dysfunctional ways, partly because they don't understand sex differences or won't talk about them. They don't understand human evolution and mating strategies. They don't even understand why monogamous marriage was invented. Like, they don't have enough respect for monogamy to actually understand like which parts of it should be challenged first. And I thought so this is a very promising subculture that might just implode under the weight of its own virtue signaling. And that would be kind of tragic.
I think another polyamorous idea is that there is no limit on love, that you can love everyone infinitely, and that's part of also relationship anarchy, that you can have these malleable relationships with people, your relationships can all accommodate each other, everything should be really fluid, you shouldn't have any kind of stable negotiation or idea about what your relationship is going to be like with any particular person. And I think that that is very difficult. I think it can be very exciting, obviously, but I think that relationships that have no stability, that have no kind of home base, can be incredibly heartbreaking, can cause a tremendous amount of jealousy, and especially if you're living some big cosmopolitan area and you're a young person, like you're somebody young living here in London. There's this troupe of people I think called the Unicorns, and they're polyamorous, and there was some Vice documentary about their different problems. And you definitely see that without kind of a home base, without any one particular person that you have a serious bond with, it can actually just leave you feeling very lonely and abandoned continuously. And so that's kind of one problem. The other idea is that somebody can, through talking out your problems, through discussing things with people, you can eradicate your jealousy with conversation, right? Because it was socially constructed, or it's from an agricultural society or whatever. So it actually should be easy to deprogram yourself of jealousy, because there's nothing deep-rooted or fundamentally human about it. And in some sense, that's a kind of growth mindset I can appreciate. But on the other hand, it does cause a huge amount of shame that I know of people who can't seem to relinquish their jealousy. And I know that polyamorous people sometimes look down on, for example, people in open relationships or swingers. I actually think swinging is like a really great you could call it a technology of figuring out how to solve the problem of sexual boredom, and also how to get the excitement of seeing your partner flirt with or being attracted to someone else. It's a deeply natural thing to see your partner flirting with or interacting with somebody else who thinks that they're attractive. And it definitely makes you think more of your partner's value. It makes you value them more and potentially take them for granted less. But we don't see our partners in contexts like that very much in a society where people are nuclear families and they're atomized. So I know polyamorous people who sort of poo-poo swinging, but swinging is actually a really ingenious solution to that problem. It's pretty hard to be jealous if you're currently having sex with somebody else. And also, if you as a couple have sex with other couples, which is what swingers generally do, then there's also a aspect of having a new experience together, which can strengthen your basic relationship.
The infinite love thing I keep encountering, right? And it's completely bizarre, because from my point of view, romantic love as an emotion, right, is actually a way of, for a person to go, here is a potential mate. They seem like a good prospect. I'm going to focus my mating effort on them. Being in love means I'm going to devote a lot of time and energy and attention to courting them and impressing them. So it is a way of taking limited resources and channeling them to a potential mate. That's what romantic love or being in love is. And if the polyamory people say, but love is infinite, it's like, why do you guys use Google Calendar to organize your dates then? Like, time is finite, money is finite, attention is finite, the amount of talking you can handle is finite if you're an introvert. So why pretend that like love is infinite if every constituent element of love is finite and has to be managed carefully? It's just fucking empty rhetoric.
Sounds like you're almost thinking about it in a masculine kind of transactional way.
I think transactional is probably fair. I mean, you could say that I'm thinking about it in a masculine way.
Well, you've got quite a masculine brain in certain ways, but people say transactional like that's a bad thing, but we're both kind of libertarian, and to us, like, transactional is win-win voluntary exchanges of like goods and services and affection and commitment. So if you're upfront about what the transaction is, and also how likely is it to be repeated, how long will it last, are you committed, that's a good thing, because that's honest and open. Yeah. I think the problem with polyamory at the moment is it hasn't been around long enough, right? It's only been around 30 years for it to develop good kind of social norms and expectations about all these roles and how they work. It would be as if you tried to run a Fortune 500 company, but you had just invented the concept of a boss and a laborer and management and accounting and marketing, and you were trying to invent all of it all at once, right? It'll probably take 2 or 3 generations before polyamory regularly works like anywhere near as well as monogamous marriage. Yeah. Which has been under continual R&D for thousands of years.
Yeah, there's like a technology of monogamy. There's common problems that you have, and you can talk to your grandma or your mom about the problems that you're having with your spouse, and they'll have advice that they know from other people because everybody has done this. Whereas with polyamory, it is a very weird subculture. It is a fringe subculture, and actually being really clear about your expectations for other is actually a violation of many of the rules of that subculture, which is that there's limitless love. And, you know, in some sense, a lot of these people are nearly limitless time that they have to expend on these multiple relationships that they're cultivating. And I think maybe polyamory for busy people is what we're sort of looking at, but also a technology of polyamory, which is saying, actually, you know, you have to bring evolutionary psychology, an understanding of human nature, an understanding of emotions, and also a skeptical view of your own emotions and your own jealousy to bear. Otherwise, it's actually not going to work. Because if you think everything's socialized, if you think everybody's infinitely malleable, and if you believe that your relationships should be able to adapt and take any form from one day to the next in an almost, you know, protean way, then it's going to be pretty hard to organize your life around variables that are not at all consistent.
And the other thing that people in sort of the polyamorous communities that I know, and people on the fringes of it say is it's just endless processing. It's just endless emotional labor and processing, and they find it far more difficult than a monogamous relationship just because of that kind of emotional time spent.
Yeah. So I know we sort of sound like very cold, calculating sociopaths in how we discuss this, but this is through like years of kind of bittersweet experience of realizing that if you have a clear enough frame for what you're doing and you can explain it clearly enough to other people, then there's actually room for a whole lot of affection and tenderness and love and passion to flourish without all this fucking processing, without all the verbal fireworks. The vaguer you are, the less well you know yourself. the more you have to constantly renegotiate everything with everyone. So I think the typical levels of polydrama that people get into are a direct result of polyamory not having enough clear hacks for how to do this stuff efficiently. And you know, in monogamy, there's also plenty of emotional processing drama, like married couples fight. And one of the big points of couples therapy is to equip people with better ways to fight, you know, that are less destructive. I think poly has to embrace that and has to be willing to say, you know, the way to get to the limitless love and being able to have wonderful, close relationships with people is kind of to be just brutally economic and upfront about what your parameters are and your rules and your norms, and like take the things seriously, and don't always be trying to play catch up. So like, well, that didn't work, let's process it. Oh, that failed as well, let's process that some more. Like, that's no way to live.
Yeah, so I think that in polyamorous people do tend to have very open and honest dialogues, often about how they're feeling, but it's not really couched in anything in particular. Like, I think when something's couched in evolutionary psychology, so for example, you can have them leave this in or not, but I'm gonna tell a little story. All right. So we had a woman that we see together stay with us for several days, and while we were all together, I missed Geoffrey, even though he was there with me the whole time. But when we were all three of us together, he didn't. I was there. He's like, why would I miss you? You were there the whole time, right? And so after she left, I was very excited to have like his attention all to myself again. And from an evolutionary perspective, obviously that makes sense. Like, I'm trying to, in some sense, well, not in just some sense, in every sense, sort of monopolize his investment. And so that's why I felt so relieved. And if I had no understanding about that, I might feel ashamed or bad that I was excited to have him all to myself, or that, because I didn't actually feel jealous when we were together. I just felt like I wanted his attention, and I was happy to have his attention again when we got back together. Anyway,
yeah,
that's
or you might misconstrue your unhappiness as being either my fault, right, or her fault. You might not have the words to express what you actually wanted from me.
Yeah.
And that's the royal road towards serious conflict.
Yeah.
Is if you don't know your own heart well enough through science, right, and you're just kind of trying to wing it based on like, well, I learned this from reading that little bit of self-help, and I learned this from that like tantric seminar, and I learned this from taking ayahuasca in Peru, and you cobble it together yourself. It's really hard to make sense of some of these little issues that pop up.
Because we've talked mostly about kind of the individual, the psychological aspects of it so far, but there are sort of societal ramifications, and I know that's something that evolutionary biologists, for example, are very interested in. It's like, what would it look like if we kind of moved over wholesale towards a new relationship model? And one of the criticisms is that what would happen is that there would be a small set of hyper successful men, and polygamy would degenerate into polygyny, which is kind of one man having access to many women. What do you make of that?
I'll talk about two things. So one thing is that I think that there's a number of different kinds of relationship architectures that you can look at, and we've picked and chosen from a variety of different ideas in order to cobble together a system that kind of works for us. But Dan Savage, who's a prominent sex advice columnist, talks about something called monogamish, which is being monogamous but then having some room for outside liaisons. And that can be something as small as somebody seeing a sex worker. It can be don't ask, don't tell, out of town kind of thing. There's all kinds of different ways of looking at it. And so this monogamish actually seems to me the most stable relationship architecture. So I don't think that polyamory is necessarily super stable, especially not as it's practiced overall. And there's a couple reasons why I think monogamish is more stable than straight monogamous, right? One of these ideas is that in monogamous culture, there's this idea that if you want to have sex with, or you have a crush on, or you have romantic ruminations about someone else, it means that there's something lacking in your kind of home-based pair relationship. And that's, I think, a very pernicious and bad idea. And so what happens sometimes is that one person or the other will start to fantasize about a third person, and then they'll think, okay, I'm risking so much in terms of my main relationship by having fantasies about this other person, that cognitive dissonance clicks in, and they think, I must be really in love with this other person and not all in love with my partner if I'm willing to take these risks for this other person. And then what will sometimes happen is, you know, this new relationship energy, right? There's this flurry of excitement about this other person, and then ultimately it burns out. You don't know the person as well as you thought you did, for example. So I think we evolved in a system where there was a lot of monogamy, at least for several years, oftentimes while children were young, but there was also a lot of dalliances, and there was a lot of affairs, and there was a lot of seeing, you know, who you were going to see next. And so I think that monogamish, which is having some outside allowance, reduces the chance of a stable relationship necessarily breaking up, because the person who cheats, for example, or who asks to make a negotiation isn't risking everything. And also the idea isn't that if you want to sleep with somebody else, it means that your primary relationship is doomed, or you're not in love with that person anymore.
The other thing people have to understand is mating market dynamics, and like, what's the local sex ratio? What is this distribution of mate values that's relevant? How do people pair up? I mean, the weird thing is you see a lot of people in their 20s doing casual dating, which is basically disorganized, unethical polyamory that's unself-aware, right? And where they're not actually telling anybody they're dating, like who else they're dating, what their commitment level is, you know, are they getting regular STI testing, blah, blah, blah. And I think it remains to be seen, like, what percent of men and what percent of women can handle, you know, open, honest polyamory, and B, what are the kind of mating market results of that? I think in certain contexts, like China, where you have this huge excess of unmarried single men who aren't going to be able to find monogamous women, certain kinds of polyamory might be a really good idea for the Chinese government to kind of consider, because otherwise, like, what's their release valve for tens of millions of guys who can't find a girlfriend? That is not a recipe for social stability. So again, I think it's the important thing is to kind of recognize this is an experimental subculture. We need to have like clear metrics of success. We need to be honest about the pros and cons. We need to be respectful of traditional marriage and monogamy and go, there's a lot of embodied wisdom in what a lot of people do, and you can't just reject it before you understand it, right? There's a kind of Chesterton's fence issue here. Like, we think we understand monogamous marriage more than most people do because we've lived an alternative to it.
And we kind of know what the kind of costs and benefits are and what would have to be managed in terms of boredom, also in terms of, you know, women like high status men. And if you are around your mate all the time, especially in isolated nuclear households, and you never see anyone else admiring your mate or flirting with your mate or trying to gossip about you so they can steal your mate, then you get no cues at all that they're desirable to anybody else. And that is a very, very unnatural environment, artificial environment. When people talk about this top percentage of women, whatever, 15%, 20%, being competed for by the vast majority of women, and that these are the men who are getting all the mating opportunities, they think that polyamory and open relationships is simply going to exacerbate that problem, and that the men who are the incels or who are losing out on the mating game are just going to lose harder. But I haven't really had that experience at all, so I've been involved in these kind of cultures of that are very matriarchal, where it's a lot of women that date various different men, and they all vouch for certain men, and they'll often, there's just so little jealousy about men. They'll say, this guy just makes a wonderful meal and he will take you on a really lovely date. And so the kind of man who wouldn't necessarily make a good full-time boyfriend, or who potentially needs leveling up before they get to the point where they can be a good full-time boyfriend, is actually the kind of person who'd be great to see once a week, right? So there's this idea of something called a relationship escalator, which is you start seeing each other, you know, every once in a while, then you see each other more, then you move in together, then you get married, then you have children, then you die. And that is the relationship escalator. And kind of an alternative to that is that, and people find this really profoundly unromantic, but I think about the people I date and the kind of social and sexual sphere that I'm in as kind of a marketplace, right? I have people that I trade with, right, most often, and that I engage with most often. There are really blurry lines between friends and lovers, and obviously people can come in and out of my life in various different roles, but I have an idea about what I want from somebody else and what role they'll fulfill, and they don't have to be everything and all things to me, and so that puts a lot less pressure on them. But also we get to enjoy each other, and we get to enjoy a certain amount of variety that we wouldn't be able to if we were just closed off to one another. And in terms of strengthening the primary relationship that I'm in with Geoffrey, I see him having other people admiring him, having other people flirt with him. I see how he manages other relationships with other people, and it actually causes me to admire him more and to think that I'm getting a better deal, and also to be happier to share him, because in that sense, if somebody is high status and is admired by multiple people, then you're getting sharing is better than having one person all to yourself that no one else wants.
Well, also you're really good at like taking kind of weird, aspy, eccentric guys and who would not make good primary boyfriends, and kind of leveling them up and training them so that they are then presentable to other women, right? And that's the thing you've done multiple times. So it's actually really good for those, incels, like to meet a woman like her who can kind of go, okay, you're not quite good enough to be full-time boyfriend, right? But you have certain traits that are enjoyable, and here's how to cultivate your other traits. And I think that's a better path for those like Aspies or incels or whatever to meet someone like her, rather than to kind of like meet a woman who's saying, okay, you're a dysfunctional, broken young man, but you're the best I can get as a woman because I'm also broken and dysfunctional. Like that's not a good way forward. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's totally fair. Yeah, and I have done that. I've been like, this is how you take a woman on a date. This is
providing a social service.
And I like Aspie men because I like the way they think, and I like that kind of systemizing thing. But also, I'm very transparent. My facial expressions are very transparent. I'm very clear about what I want, and so I think that women can learn a lot. And Aspies, I mean, now we're going on about talking about dating Aspies, but they actually can be really great to date because they do want to make you happy. They just don't know how to do it with unconscious or cues or reading facial expressions or whatever. If you tell somebody exactly what you want and they want to make you happy, it's very easy. It's only when you have an expectation that somebody's going to infer what you want that you have these various different problems. And if somebody figures out what a woman wants, it's a lot easier to figure out what other women want afterwards. But yeah, definitely I've dated guys who I've never had a girlfriend before, and being like, I actually can't be your full-time girlfriend. Your job this week is to go on 4 dates and you tell me how they are. And I really love to do that. It's not a chore at all, yeah.
Famously, Jordan Peterson got into trouble for talking about enforced monogamy. And his point, I think, was that monogamy evolves. It's societally and culturally enforced, and it's an evolutionary trait. So as evolutionary psychologists, are you not persuaded by the argument that monogamy has evolved time and time again in cultures as a kind of as a way of coping with the pressures of life and a way of furthering the species?
Yeah. So monogamy has been very important because the men who are the most likely to be violent and the most likely to cause problems in any given society are those men who are out of the mating game. So men who don't have a wife or a girlfriend are many times more likely to engage in homicide or really risky bad behavior. One of the best predictors of a young man cleaning his life up is actually him getting a girlfriend or a wife, for example. And so young men who are unmated or who don't have the faculties, like the resources or whatever, to get a long-term mate have always been dangerous in society. And so what you've seen is there's been monogamy as a cultural meme that has enabled these men to each be assigned a woman, and thus it actually reduces the kind of likelihood of insurgence, for example. So that does make sense, right? But what I think Jordan Peterson is failing to understand is that if there were more people who were having open relationships, and some young men, for example, who were not necessarily good material for a woman to date full time, but were good enough for somebody or a couple women to see casually, that guy, I think, is just as unlikely to engage in difficult and aggressive and criminal behavior as somebody who is married, right?
Yeah, I mean, if a guy is really not good husband material and you kind of shoehorn him into husband role, kind of against his wishes, like he's just not really capable of that kind of sexual commitment, what you're basically asking is for some poor woman to fall on the sword for the greater good of society, to put up with this motherfucker and like do the best she can with him. Whereas in a polyamorous society, he might be able to find women who actually kind of like his dark streak or his bad boyness or the fact that he spends, 3 out of 4 weeks working on some oil rig somewhere or whatever. There's just more flexibility. So just the way that the free market with money is better than a barter economy, right? A polyamorous society could be better for everybody in terms of exchanging sex and romance.
Yeah.
Than trying to fit everybody into this monogamous paradigm.
Another thing that people who are kind of more traditionalists talk about a lot is about how if there were more polyamorous people and there was more kind of casual, non-exclusive negotiated relationships, that fewer people would have investing fathers, right? We're not really sure exactly how much a investing father figure is actually important. So it does seem like it could be quite important, but it also seems like the men who are likely to leave also have certain genetic qualities, right? They tend to be more promiscuous. They tend to be more criminal, for example. And so it's very hard to tease apart the environmental and the genetic effects. So I know that some people think that if you've made polyamory more popular, that there would be many fewer investing fathers in the picture. But I think that...
Like the irony is it's not that hard to tease apart the effects. You do a large twins study and you can tease them apart. And what we find is, in fact, almost all of the traits that people say are due to absent fathers are actually heritable traits that are not much influenced by family structure. So, right, the irony is a lot of the people who are saying, we need monogamy because we need dads, because we need role models, and who, in other contexts will be like, you should never ignore the behavior genetics. Yeah. But in this domain, they're ignoring the behavior genetics. And like they're making a kind of blank slate argument that says, it really, really deeply matters that you have a stable family home or else the kid will grow up to be a terrible person. It's like, that is not what the twin studies show.
And do you think you're typical in your emotional reactions? Or is there something special about the way that you guys are able to approach it that is different to how most people approach their relationships?
That's why I don't think, I often say I don't endorse polyamory. Like, I don't endorse my particular relationship style. I just sort of endorse certain kind of tactics. And I definitely need to get all of this kind of down in blogs or on paper at some point. But yeah, I'm really strange in many ways. Like, I'm unusual. I'm not, neurotypical in a lot of ways. So I tend to not feel bad feelings for very long. And I tend to have even when I was a child, I had quite a kind of utilitarian way of thinking about things. So my view has always been, if I'm distressed or I feel bad or I feel jealous, if, for example, because of me being able to be stoical about those feelings or being able to manage those feelings, Geoffrey and somebody that I like, especially somebody I like, if they're enjoying each other's company, then I'm actually doing something kind of for the greater good, right? And I think Geoffrey is wonderful. So in some sense, I would feel guilty monopolizing him entirely. And it's actually very much the kind of utilitarian reasons that I think about it. And most people would not think about things that way. Instead, they would think about how they were maximizing their cues of commitment and loyalty by acting incredibly jealously or by having a proprietary feeling about somebody. So I think in that way I'm unusual. I have a very kind of high hedonic state. I'm happy all the time. It's basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, you're happy. I think it helps that you're bisexual.
Yeah, it helps a lot that I'm bisexual.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like,
So I there's this concept that red pill people use a lot, which is called hypergamy. And hypergamy is a woman's desire to be with a man who's higher in status than she is. And you see this in romance novels all the time, women who are with billionaires, millionaires, sheriffs, kings, whatever the case may be. And so the way that I manage my jealousy to a great extent is because I'm attracted often to the women that Geoffrey sees, and also because I think about him having high status. The best indicator of a man's status is how many women like him and desire him, because women are really, really good at sussing out how quality a man is. So if Geoffrey has other women who are interested in him, it increases my perception of how good he is, and it actually makes me feel really in love and excited about him, right? So that's kind of how I deal with it, and that's kind of a very primitive emotion, like this, you have status, me want you. That's super primitive, but I really, it has really good outcomes in terms of me managing my jealousy. So I inflate that emotion and I use it all the time in order to enjoy whatever it is that we've negotiated.
Yeah, and I'm just Aspie. So it's all easy. I mean, I'm very rational, I'm very systematizing. I seek out principled solutions to issues, things that make sense. I hate inconsistency, I hate hypocrisy. And so it was and a lot of people in polyamory who are good at it, I think have a little bit of that Aspergery sort of hyper-rationality, because they're willing to kind of take a step back from
just
their...
keep track of the calendars, you've got to be...
Right, you have to, like, systematizing and to be able to take a step back from your kind of monogamist background and think seriously about alternatives. I think it helps to have a kind of experimental scientific attitude. And a kind of epistemic humility also that says, man, I don't know, we're just going to try it out and see what happens and learn as we go and try to keep notes about what succeeds and fails.
Yeah. I mean, we're also sort of irreplaceable to each other. This is going to sound really romantic, but I don't want it to. So basically, we're both really unusual in several different ways, right? I actually tend to attract people who are Aspie because I'm incredibly emotionally transparent and my facial expression is very transparent, and it doesn't bother me to say exactly what I want. I think many women don't want to say exactly what they want because part of the cue investment that they're looking for is for somebody to use enough cognitive cycles to guess what they want. So I think that that's a big part of it. But we are very unusually suited to one another, and we are irreplaceable to one another. So that's why we can have a hierarchical relationship where I'm not worried that somebody's going to replace me or that anybody's going to replace him. But most people, if you look at Tinder, what do you know about somebody if you look at them on Tinder? You know that they live close by and you know what their face looks like, maybe, right? But people get married with people that they meet on Tinder all the time. Back in the day, people would get married to people who just lived around the corner. So proximity and attraction are the main reasons that people get together, not because they have any deep-seated, interesting stuff in common or that they have unusual, lifestyles or whatever the case may be. So if two people, all they have in common is that they're nice to each other and they're attracted to each other, they are infinitely replaceable by anybody else. And it's going to be very difficult for them to do hierarchical poly without somebody else coming in and taking people's places again and again and again. And that's what you see also in polyamorous communities a lot, is this constant kind of switching of partners and the endless conversations that people have, emotional conversations. And I actually think that people like that. I think that's why they do it. Otherwise, or they don't have anything else fulfilling in their lives. So it's something that they're trying to maximize. Another way that people can have unique things in common, and you see this a lot, is somebody will be monogamous for a long time and then they'll open up their relationship a little bit. And as Dan Savage says, just because you open up your relationship doesn't mean you have to blow the door off its hinges, right? You can have a relationship opened up a little bit. And there's this terrible bias, unfortunately, in that you hear all the time about people who say, we opened up our relationship, everything went to shit, and now we're broken up. You very rarely hear, because so many people are on the down low or in the closet about having open relationships, we decided to have an open relationship and everything worked out marvelously, right? And so, yeah, maybe it's the case that people open their relationships up and it's more likely to end badly, but we wouldn't know because we have a completely biased sample. We only hear about how open relationships screw things up because that's the only time we hear about people having opened up their relationship.
Is that one of the reasons that you guys want to be open about talking about it?
We just like attention. I think, yeah, we feel like it's important, but also it is one way in which we use evolutionary psychology in our day-to-day lives and our knowledge about the psychology of relationships.
I think it's important for people to have, to be able to see couples who are like reasonable people and not sort of freaky California New Age delusionals, like being able to do an open relationship and talk about it honestly, its pros and its cons and why it wouldn't necessarily work for everybody, and not sort of proselytize it recklessly. I think that's really important, because if folks like us are sort of on the down low and like quietly doing open, and we're only letting the most extreme weird people show up on reality TV as like the exemplars of polyamory, I think that's terrible, right? It would be like if the only examples of monogamous marriage that you ever saw were just people fighting during divorce court. Like, that doesn't make monogamy look very good either.
And you said proselytizing then, and I think that kind of links into what I think some people feel so triggered maybe by certain aspects of polyculture, which kind of feels like people are sort of evangelizing it and saying, well, it's the next evolutionary step. Like there's this kind of either implicit or explicit kind of sense of, well, you're just not evolved enough. If you were more evolved, you would be poly, and monogamy is something that we're going to evolve past. You don't think, what do you make of that? There is that sort of sense in some areas of the poly community.
Oh,
I
yeah,
guess.
a lot of them have a sort of progressive utopian cult that eventually, like in 100 years, everyone will be enlightened and polyamorous and able to overcome their jealousy programming and blah, blah, blah. And I think the percentage of people who are in successful poly and open relationships or swingers will increase. It already is increasing, especially among young people. But I don't think monogamous marriage is going to evaporate anytime soon. It has many, many benefits to individuals, couples, kids, civilization, etc. My main concern is just create the broadest market that you can for different mating systems, be experimental, see what works, trade information about successes and failures, and then hopefully in a couple more generations we'll have a sort of sense of like, these are the top 3 or 4 kinds of relationships that tend to work pretty well for most people. And one of those might be monogamous marriage. One of them probably will be hierarchical poly. There might be a couple of others people invent. I don't know.
I mean, people have definitely said stuff about, on Twitter. People actually very rarely come after me on Twitter. It's not an invitation, by the way. And they say it's kind of elitist, the way we say like, oh, you kind of have to have very high emotional intelligence. You have to be smart. You have to be have a unique bond in order to be polyamorous. Mostly, I've seen polyamorous people say that anybody can be polyamorous. And I have followed some polyamorous groups in places like small cities in England to see all of the crazy drama that gets kicked up there because people are managing relationships without any kind of understanding of human nature, I think. So it's important, I think, to talk about it. But I also think it's important for people to be able to evaluate themselves and for some people to say, no, I really want to be monogamous with somebody long term, but to consider actually that both men and women have desire for sexual and romantic variety, that wanting to have sex with somebody else doesn't necessarily mean that you've fallen out of love with the person that you're with, and also to examine how this very isolated culture that we've put together, where people don't live in any kind of communal way, where they live really, isolated from everyone else, about how that's also contributing to this monogamous culture where people are really starving for even outside friendship. And I think one thing that polyamory does is, because, when you have lovers or friends who are also sometimes lovers, you actually just develop closer bonds with them. And it's helped me have a much more, close, expanded network than people I know who are monogamous. And that's, I think, a big difference between people. People who go to church tend to be happier than people who don't. But also people in unique sexual subcultures tend to be happier in their relationships, because their extended network has this pleasurable component which knits them together more tightly than other kinds of groups would be knitted together.
I saw Brett Weinstein tweet the other day saying, so he's a skeptic about polyamory, but he said, if anyone can pull this off, then Geoffrey and Diana can pull it off.
I think someone else said that about us, but did he say that too?
Yeah,
oh, that's kind.
So if you can't, then I guess nobody can. Are you comfortable holding that much responsibility?
No, I mean, no, because life is stochastic, and we could fuck it up, and hopefully we won't.
Yep.
But we could fuck it up. And this is why it's so important to have a wider variety of people kind of coming out and saying, we're swingers, we're open, we're poly. And people who actually have paid jobs and who don't necessarily live in Southern California, and who don't necessarily just hang out with other Burning Man people, to kind of normalize it, right? The way that gay and lesbian culture got normalized in the 90s with sitcoms that showed, oh, you can be gay and employed, right? And in a committed relationship. And I think, it's very kind for folks to say, well, if we two can't succeed, nobody can. But it's not like we have some weird poly superpower. It's just that we're smart people who've worked really hard to get in touch with our emotions, who've learned all we can about polyculture, who have the appropriate degree of skepticism about it, and who have a deep and abiding respect for tradition and monogamy and marriage, and don't just reject it all as bullshit. And who go polyamory to me might be 30% better than monogamous marriage, but it's not 8,000% better.
Yeah, and I do think that it comes down to people trying things out, their personal experience. Jealousy can be desensitized. It takes a really long time, but when you talk about the elephant in the rider, this kind of analogy about the mind, people just imagine how jealous they would feel if their partner went off with somebody else, right? And then right away that makes them have a moral problem with any talk about polyamory. And I've heard people, had conversations with lots of people who are otherwise totally rational about, they can be totally rational about organ markets and legalized prostitution and all this other stuff. And then you get to polyamory and they're just immediately thinking about their partner in flagrante delicto with somebody else. And they're like, no, it's super wrong, it's terrible. And you have to think about where your response is coming from. All of us endorse or have serious problems with the ideologies based on how we would think it would affect us. So I think this kind of idea about civilizational collapse is just one way of people actually managing their own feelings.
Geoffrey, Diana, thank you very much.